Welcome back, everybody. In one of my previous videos, I talked a little bit about clockwise and counterclockwise brushless motors for your quads, and how it probably doesn't make any difference if you have just normal motors, because they go either direction. I was corrected on that video in the comment section regarding that. There are some motors that have cooling fins that are directional, so they're designed to draw air in one direction, push it through, and then eject it out the other side. I don't know how much the directional feature of that matters, if it draws air both ways, if you reverse it or not. I haven't used those kinds of motors, so if you have that type of motors, maybe that matters. Anyway, the purpose of this video, I want to talk about reversing your motors. What are the advantages and what are the disadvantages? Betaflight expects, and you can see it on Betaflight here. You can see it here. In the configuration page, you can see that the normal configuration is for the propellers to turn in, and that is the normal configuration. If you reverse it, you can see that we're talking about having the propellers turn outwards like that. The reason Betaflight needs to know which way they're going is because it depends on those going that particular direction for it to be able to yaw, to induce yaw into your craft. I come back to the Rooster here. I want to talk a little bit about why you would want to do that. Like I said, the Betaflight comes with the props turning into the camera like this. And the first obvious advantage to having them turn outwards like this is to not be kicking up crap into your camera. You can see my camera has divots, and it's been hit by rocks, it's been hit by twigs or dirt, whatever it's getting. And part of it's probably because the props sling it right into there. So having them go out this way would stop that. Of course, the disadvantage is now it's going to kick stuff into the side of your, to where all your electronics are. So another advantage that I've seen talked about is if you're like me and you tend to hit things like gates or whatever, and your props are going this direction, the likely result is that it will bring it in like that and probably break your prop. Kind of sucks the quad right into there. If they're going the other direction, you might expect that it would sling the quad or the object out off to the side, and that's probably a favorable situation. Another thing I've seen talked about is if you're stuck in a tree. Well, first of all, there's less likely that you'd be stuck in a tree because it's trying to push the quad out of the tree when it hits instead of trying to pull it into the tree. But even if you are stuck in a tree, if you have your props going this way and you can arm your quad when it's stuck up there, perhaps it will push itself out. So there's an advantage there. Aerodynamically, I'm really having a hard time determining whether it's going to make any difference. So it's really just going to have to be set it up and put it to the test and feel if it's any different. And I'm hoping that I have enough experience flying this frame now that I can notice if there's anything substantial. If you have experience doing this and you have experience flying them in both directions and comparing them, I would really love to hear from you about what your thoughts are on it. Did you notice a substantial difference, or was it so subtle that you probably couldn't really even tell for sure? That's what I'd like to hear from you about. As a helicopter pilot, that's one of the things I do when I'm not playing with quads. There are some aerodynamical, is that even a word? There are some aerodynamic issues with helicopters when you're moving forward, because you have a blade that's got its speed relative to the helicopter plus the forward speed that the helicopter has. And then when that blade is retreating, it has less. So it gets more lift on the advancing side than it does on the retreating side. And that causes some limitations with the helicopter, and it causes some design criteria that you have to think about when you're building helicopters. And in this, that's going to have some effect, but I don't see how it's very substantial, especially considering the speeds that these props go. Helicopter blades really, like a helicopter rotor, might go 300-400 RPM, something like that, depends on the helicopter. These are going thousands of RPM, so I just don't think that that forward speed advantage is going to be that much. There's also another thing to think about with that, in that when the quad yaws, when we command it to yaw, the flight controller does that by changing the torque on the motors that are going clockwise versus the motors that are going counterclockwise. It changes the speed on them, which changes the torque. So the overall torque on the frame is going to want to turn it in a clockwise direction or a counterclockwise direction because of that torque. Just similar to how if you're holding a cordless drill and it gets stuck on something, it wants to go one way. It's the same concept. And when it's doing that, it has to increase the speed of some blades. And if the blade that is higher, for instance, if you're in a turn, and this one is having to go faster to do the turn, we might find the limit here because it's also, in addition to doing the yaw, it's also holding it's going faster because it's holding that side of the quadcopter up a little bit higher. I still have a hard time believing that this is going to be anything more than a super subtle thing to feel when you're flying. So I'm going to start flying my quads backwards, or I guess they're not backwards, they're with the props on not the default way that Betaflight is expecting them. And I'll get back to you on that. Let's talk about your thoughts on that. I'm going to go fly this when the weather gets better here in Kansas, and I'll give you my thoughts on it. And we'll see. If you do change the configuration of your quadcopter, consider doing a quick line of sight flight first, just to make sure everything is okay. Because if one of the props is on backwards or one of the motors is going backwards, your quadcopter will turn into a Decepticon and try to kill you. So use caution when you're doing that. And as always, when you're working on it, make sure your blades are not on. Other than that, give it a try. Let me know what you think. Please comment on this video and we'll discuss this. And as more is learned, I'll create a follow-up video. I hope you have a good day. Take care. I'll see you in the next video.